You are attending, and we really appreciate your interest in our schools. We also want you to let you know that some of the things we move through rather quickly, and I want you to know that the board has had time to reflect on these things, and we have had lots of time to study it, and in mostly open public meetings, our study sessions and other things. As directors, we strive to understand the issues that are brought before us, and we strive to make decisions that are in the best interests of our community and our students and our taxpayers and support. So, and that's our main goal. I also want you to know that this meeting is recorded for broadcast on PSC TV, Charter Cable Channel 191. And it's also available by searching Pasco Schools on YouTube. We are privileged to have 3 student representatives. One is excused today. They can't legally vote, but they give us very, very valuable input. So thank you for coming this evening, sorry. So the flag salute is going to be by Captain Gray Principal, and we will turn the time over to Kathy Bolson.
Good evening, Vice President Phillips, Superintendent Whitney, and members of the board. It is my great honor and pleasure to introduce to you the captains of our Nano Team Technology that took second place at CBC and the captain of our robotics team this past school year at Captain Gray STEM Elementary.
Hello. Hello, my name is Henry Lamberson, and I'm the captain of the nanotechnology team. My family...
Hi, my name is Adrian Gonzalez, and I am the captain of the robotics team.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can you introduce your families now?
Yeah, my family is back there all along that row. The whole, they take up the whole row.
Can you stand up?
Olive Lamberson, Hudson, Brooke Lamberson, my mom, Serenity, Hudson, and Olive, and Sierra behind my mom.
Thank you.
Today I just have my mom with me, and she's right here. Her name is Evelia Gonzalez.
Great. There's no such thing as just a mom. Thank you and your families for coming. We really appreciate you being here. Okay, Ms. Smith, can you please call the roll?
Present. Present.
Ms. Lampkin?
Present.
Ms. Lace?
Present.
Mr. Lehrman?
Excused.
Mr. Mendoza?
Present.
Mrs. Phillips?
Present.
Mr. Knapp?
Excused. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a special recognition, and we're going to turn the time over for Mr. Shane Penninger for that. Edinger, sorry.
That's all right. Good evening, Board Vice President Phillips, Superintendent Whitney, and members of the board. As you know, it is a tradition here at Pasco School District to honor our friends and colleagues who are retiring or have retired during the 2016-2017 school year. Earlier tonight, we had a chance to honor 40 retirees during your study session. I'd like to read their names one more time in recognition of their service to Pasco schools. Cha Amak, Ina Ames, James Errol, Diana Baker, Rosalva Bogart, Randy Buer, Judy Church, Susan Clapper, Glenda Cloud, Marilyn Davis, Colleen Doyle, Andy Eads, Hugh Fulton, Lynn Fulton, Cindy Gallegos, Susan Garth, Rosa Gonzalez, Linda Gregg, Rosa Guajardo, Diane Hart, Shannon Higgins, Pam Johnston, Diane Kostoff, Mary Lopez, Margaret Macon, Blanca Martinez, Nancy McKeever, Virginia McLeod, Marcy Miller, Catherine O'Leary, Elizabeth Ortega, Dick Powers, Sheree Reeser, Robin Ryan, Scott Salisbury, Sandy Smith, Karen Van Clavern, Linda Lee Vansel, Pam Wheatley, and Linda Woodall. Together, they have a combined 933 years of service to Pasco schools, which deserves a round of applause. Tonight, we're also honored to have Elaine Banks here with us from the Benton Franklin School Retirees Association. Washington Governor Jay Inslee declared the week of March 13th through 19th as School Retirees Appreciation Week in Washington. We thought it would be poignant to honor our local retirees tonight. Here's the governor's proclamation. I will read it for you. Whereas the Washington State School Retirees Association recognizes all retired school employees, and whereas the WSSRA educates and assists retirees in meeting the special challenges retirement brings and works to improve their general welfare, and whereas the WSSRA aids in advancing education by supporting high educational standards, and whereas the WSSRA promotes group and individual involvement in charitable projects and activities, sponsors scholarships, and maintains interests and participation in educational and community activities, and whereas the WSSRA supports and encourages retired educators to remain active in the education profession through volunteer activities associated with learning. Now, therefore, I, Jay Inslee, Governor of the State of Washington, hereby proclaim March 13th through the 19th of 2017 as School Retirees Appreciation Week in Washington. I urge all people in our state to join me in that special observance. Well, Elaine, if you could please come forward. The Pasco School District would like to thank you and the Benton Franklin School Retirees Association for your efforts to provide support for the students in our schools.
Mr. Edinger, as Mrs. Banks is making her way up, I'd also like to introduce to the board Helen Bakshis, who is a retired teacher music teacher from Mark Twain Elementary. So I wanted to acknowledge Mrs. Bakshis is here tonight with us as well.
And she is president this year of our unit.
Welcome, Madam President.
Go ahead. They've got a small token for you. Or you'd like to say a few words?
I'd like to say just a few words of what we're doing to help our teachers, our active teachers. As maybe you don't know, well, first I want to thank you for inviting us. I think this is wonderful. It's good to see Sherry. I haven't seen Sherry in a long time, so it was good to say hello to her. But Ben Franklin School Retirees has given 6 $200 grants to active teachers this year for projects that they want to do in their classroom that the school district can't afford. And also, we only have, well, altogether, we have 20 in the Tri-Cities that applied for these grants. And we'd like to have more of our active teachers because we have more money to give. So we're asking them to, if you need active teachers, if you have a project you don't have money for, tell us about it. And you will get your $200, let me tell you. Also, I think that some of you may recognize that we also have a pre-retirement seminar for all of those teachers that think they're going to retire within maybe 5 years. But we like to have them be prepared for their retirement. This year it will be October 19th. It's a Thursday, and it's going to be in Richland. Pasco has been our host for 2 or 3 different times, and I must say, Randy, you do a fabulous job. Thank you. So we will probably be looking forward to coming to Pasco next year. But thank you for inviting us.
Mrs. Banks, I think you grabbed one of my papers.
I want to make sure, see if you know what you're saying.
I didn't have it memorized. I apologize. Tonight, we'd also like to take a moment to recognize a local group that's made a generous donation to our students. For the past 4 years, the satellite group of the Pasco Kiwanis Club has donated books in English and Spanish to all of our Pasco kindergartners. This year, each kindergartner will once again be able to take home their own book that they can read with their families over the summer. I'd like to ask Greg Dominguez from the Pasco Kiwanis Club to come forward and receive a small token of our appreciation. Thank you, Greg, and thank you to the Pasco Kiwanis Club for this generous donation. And since we're talking about books, we would also like to recognize a local author who has generously offered to give every single first grader in the Tri-Cities a copy of his children's book. Lynn Fielding served on the Kennewick School Board for 24 years and has been involved in literacy efforts for several years. He is donating 4,000 English and Spanish versions of his children's book, Why There Is Always Room for Dessert, to elementary schools in Pasco, Kennewick, and Richland. And the books are being delivered to all of our Pasco first graders this week. Now, Lynn Fielding couldn't be with us tonight, but his daughter, Sonnet Fielding, is here on his behalf. Sonnet, if you could please come forward to receive a small token of our appreciation. Sonnet, thank you for being here tonight, and please let your father know how thankful we are for this generous donation to our Pasco students.
And I believe Sonnet illustrated those books.
That's right.
Thank you for your support, all of your support of Pasco School District, and we really want to thank the retirees and everything that they have given us and our children and our futures, quite frankly. It is always awe-inspiring to me to listen to the years of service and the things that these teachers have accomplished in our ceremony that we had earlier. It's just a privilege, and it always is inspiring to me that every year there are teachers that had a direct impact on my own children. That is amazing that can hit every single year. So we so appreciate what you do for our kids and really our future. So thank you. The next thing we need to do is we need to approve the minutes from the meeting of May 23rd, 2017.
I move to approve the regular meeting minutes of the May 23rd, 2017 meeting.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, the motion carries. The next agenda item is the agenda review.
So there are no changes or additions to the board agenda this evening, but I would like to call your attention to our request for an executive session under RCW 4231-10-1G for personnel.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is audience comments. If you have comments for the board, please come to the microphone, state your name and affiliation with Pasco Schools. You have 2 minutes to give comments, and Ms. Thornton will raise a yellow card when there's 30 seconds left. If you see the red card, just try to finish your thought and end your comments. So are there any audience comments this evening? Okay, thank you. So board communications now. Mr. Richardson, would you like to start?
Sure, thank you. I just want to recognize all our retirees. I'm always impressed with the years that they serve, and there were many, many with 20, 30 plus years of service, and that's just something we don't see as much anymore, and I would love to have a goal that everyone that comes to Pasco stays here until they retire. I worked where I work. I've worked there for 6 years, and I have every intention of staying there until I retire, and I would just love for people to enjoy and feel that they have support and the professional development and a great work environment in Pasco, that we just keep everyone forever. So thank you to all those that have served in our district. With the other board members, I participated in all the graduations, and just inspired by our students and their teachers and all the great things that they're accomplishing. And Look forward to next year's graduations again. And finally, I recently visited our middle schools, kind of as part of some of our studying of facilities. It was a good timing for that. And wrapped up the school year, I visited all the schools this year throughout the school year and met with teachers and students and staff, and appreciate all the time that they devoted to meet with me and share their ideas and perspectives and what's going well and things that we can work on. And I'm grateful for all the accommodations, and had a lot of student leaders that helped lead some of these tours and classroom visits, and it was great to meet some of our students as well.
Most of us also on the board attended the Pasco House dedication, which was a great advances for the kids and showing what the house is a beautiful home, and it shows the quality of the things that the students can do. The house is beautiful, and they did a great job, even with all the snow days. They completed the house on time, and it just goes to show that there's other things that the kids, that Pasco provides for the kids to do. And I was also attended all the graduations, and it's always great to see how Pasco does a great job in all the graduations. It goes off flawless, and they get it done in an hour. And we picked a great weekend because the other weekends and great times, because if it had been a little bit later, we would have had there was a little bit of wind and a little bit of storm, and it could have been different. We've had several years where it could have been different, but it turned out beautiful for all of the schools. All of the classes and graduations were great. The retirement parties that I've attended have been great. The PAE did a wonderful job for their retirement party that they had. I don't remember what night it was, but they did a wonderful job honoring all of their retirees, and the schools that I attended that had retirement parties for their staff has been great so far. So I thank everyone for their participation in graduation. I know that they worked really hard, all the administrators, counselors, teachers, to make graduation a great for all of the students. So I appreciate all the hard work that you've done. Thank you.
So it's a time of year where we send people off. We've got teachers retiring, and we've got students graduating and leaving, and a time of celebration, certainly heading off to new adventures. And I would also like to recognize and commend our teachers who have been in the district a long time and who are graduating themselves, graduating to retirement, and thank them for their service. And those who are staying, ultimately that day will come for you as well, and appreciate your continued service. Was able to attend to the Team Pasco home dedication as well, another lovely home, and lots of student hours and service put in there, and also attended the graduations. I'm always impressed in these graduations of how efficient they're run, the student speakers, the messages that they give. I had the opportunity to speak at my graduation. I passed on that. I didn't want to do that. And I've always reflected on that and thought, man, that was a missed opportunity that's probably impacted the rest of my life. But anyway, I'm impressed with our students. One thing that these students will go through the year. Some of them work really hard, do really well. They're overachievers. Others barely come sliding in at the last minute, just under the wire, and make it out there. But on graduation day, they're all dressed the same. They all look the same. They all get the same diploma. Of course, they're going to have different experiences afterwards, but I commend those who make the effort and finish. Unfortunately, this year we had some that have met all the requirements with the exception of some of the state required testing. And unfortunately, we don't know how that's going to end up yet. I think ultimately they're going to get that requirement will be waived again this year, but it's hard to say with the way the legislature's playing politics over there. But one of the things I did recognize and notice in our graduation, and we have a lot of teachers that have master's degrees. I was just impressed in their wearing their colors from their different schools, and I was surprised, I guess. And maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, but the commitment to get that extra degree, I think, is commendable, and we have some outstanding teachers in our district, so I would like to recognize them and thank them for their service and dedication to our students.
Hello, everyone. Well, yeah, it was graduation for me as well, and at first, I was telling my mom, like, my mom was asking me if it felt weird for me, and then I said it was gonna be something normal, like I was just gonna go through it. And then graduation day, we're doing rehearsals, and it was hitting me right there, like, wait, this is it, it's done. And I was one of the students that made it under the wire, to be honest. It was I was behind at first, but I managed to work hard and get through it. And it wasn't just me that managed to do that. My teachers helped me as well. They worked really hard with me. That's what I love about Pasco. And but yeah, we made it. I got to give my speech as well, and that was a missed opportunity that you didn't give yours, but but even then, like, now I still feel like, oh, I could have said this, or I could have said this different, or like I still think about a lot more things that I could have said. But I mean, I hope it motivated some of the students that didn't make it to graduation, because they can still make it, and I hope that they don't give up. And I also want to thank the retirees for their service, and especially Sandy Smith she was one of my teachers for her last year, and really hardworking lady, even like to the last year. I remember when I first came into her class, I was like, man, it's winter and I don't even have a car yet. I have to take the transit, it's super cold. And she's like, I have to drive all the way from Walla Walla, she said. I was like, okay, then I was like, I'll show up to your class. And I was like, yeah. And then she also gave a speech. She talked about tough love, and I appreciate that as well. I'm gonna tell her to YouTube this as well, because thank you. I wasn't here for the what's it called, the recognition. Yeah, for the recognition, but thank you for that, and thanks for the tough love and everything you helped me with. And yeah, I mean, it definitely does feel different. Now I'm looking forward to military. And I've been talking a lot to my recruiters and just enjoying these last few months, I guess, that I have. And after that, I'm looking forward to college as well. And thank you.
Hello, everyone. So even though it's been almost a year that I've been sitting up here, my heart is still beating really fast. And I think it's because I'm nervous that this is the second to last meeting that as student reps we have. And so, as many of us have said, it's a beginning, but it's also like an ending to a chapter of our lives. So our student reps, we graduated, but not just us. Obviously, we had many graduations I was lucky to attend, my own Chiawanas and New Horizons as well. And as Mr. Christensen said, it's nice to hear the different speeches, and I regret not speaking at mine. I didn't get the opportunity, and as I'm sitting here right now, I'm thinking, what can I say? And I think I can just encourage everyone else. I know there's freshmen, sophomores, juniors that are continuing with their high school careers, but there's also 8th graders that are entering high school. And so I just want to tell everyone, don't be scared. High school, it's a fun part of your life. It's a challenge, but everything in your life is going to be a challenge. So just make the most of it and keep trying. And I want to say thank you to all the teachers, and congratulations to all retirees. And Evan's not here tonight because tomorrow he's leaving on his mission. So if you're watching, Evan, good luck, and hope to see you in 2 years when you come back. And I'll be staying here. I decided to go to WSU Tri-Cities, so you guys can't get rid of me too soon. But yeah, so I don't know what else to say other than it's been a fun experience, and thank you for letting me be a part of it.
That'll be a really good graduation speech right there. So a round of applause.
Graduation is always an exciting time here. It's been fun to watch the graduation rates rise over the years and the great work that's done by our principals and our staff and the amazing teachers. It's fun to watch the teachers and the student interactions. Sometimes it's hard to do as we're handing out the diplomas, but you can just tell how these teachers have made a huge difference in the lives of our kids. I thought I would hate, here's true confessions, I thought I would hate sitting through all these graduations every year, and it's ended up being a privilege and one that I look forward to. I got to go to the committee meeting for this last committee meeting for the Bulldogs houses, and if anybody doesn't know what that is, kids from both Pasco, they're not Bulldog houses, Team Pasco houses, sorry. Anyway, they used to be Bulldog houses, but both Chihuahua and Pasco High School students come together and build this house, but it's also amazing the work that goes on behind the scenes, and there's lots of people on that help, that control the finances and make sure everything's paid for, and that really make that possible for those kids to have really an experience that they will take throughout their lifetime, and it will benefit them. So another great program, like so many of the great programs that Pasco School District offers because of the teachers and the great people that we have here. So anyway, I appreciate the work that's done in those. Now we will go to the next item on the agenda, and Eric Bowles will help us with some more curriculum adoption. So,
Eric, before you start, I'd like to just acknowledge my own participation in graduation. And as a first year, I'm finishing up my first year as superintendent, and I think there was a lot of things. It's kind of like you think you know, but you have no idea until you're sitting in the chair. And I think, there was a lot of things that I wasn't quite ready for. And in particular, standing on the stage and watching the kids at graduation was probably one of the most inspiring and overwhelming moments as an educator in my career. And I think the acknowledgement that I had is each and every one of us in this room and in this organization has a celebration that day. Every single one of those kids has a kindergarten teacher, and they were you. Every single one of those kids has a neighbor, and they were you. And so, as the kids walk across that stage, it is really a celebration for this community. And I have to tell you, as I interacted with the graduating seniors this year over the course of a couple weeks at a variety of different events and so forth, I cried a lot because they were so inspirational. And there's just this recognition that I haven't really done a whole lot with my life yet in comparison to what these kids have done. They're just extraordinary, and I found myself being really compelled to do more and be a better person because of their inspiration. And so I just want to extend to each of you here that each of you had a part in that celebration over the graduations, and it just was an extraordinary experience. And I feel so grateful to be a part of a community and really society at this time when we have young people who Misty and Jesus and Evan represent, 900 kids who walked across that stage and are a reflection of this community and the core values of the people in this room and in this community. So I feel very grateful to have been the superintendent who got to present those graduates, and it absolutely is an experience I'll never forget, and each of you in here had a role in that. So congratulations to you as well. Thank you, Ms. Bowles.
Thank you. Good evening, Vice President Phillips, Superintendent Whitney, and members of the board. I'm here before you this evening at very close to what's the end of what's been a very long and winding road this year around curriculum review and recommendations. Tonight I'm bringing the committee recommendations for social studies, music, and technology for the board to review. You're probably familiar with the contents of this presentation because only a few slides actually change. I'd like to start by recognizing our committee members who may be in the audience tonight. Before they stand and receive some well-deserved recognition, I'd just like to reiterate from past presentations, almost every night upstairs we've got groups of teachers and administrators working from about 4 to 7 to make this happen. There's a total of 8 recommendations coming forward to the board, it's truly an extraordinary lift, and we couldn't do it without the incredible work and sacrifice of their own personal time of these committee members. So if you served on the committee and you're in the audience, could you please stand and be recognized? I'd also like to recognize Greg Olson in PAE and Suzanne Hall from the curriculum department and her team. Both of those individuals, as well as members of their teams, have done an incredible job of communicating through this highly complex and intricate process. The partnership with so many variables to work through has really truly been extraordinary, and the logistical lift has been extraordinary as well. So Suzanne and team and Greg and team, we'd like to recognize you as well for the work that you've done. Without the cooperation and the diligence, there's no way we could have pulled off such a tremendous logistical effort. So the committee process, this probably looks relatively familiar to everyone at this point. We followed exactly the same process, starting with a needs assessment and then making a recommendation ultimately to the Instructional Materials Committee. So we'll start with recommendations around K-8 technology. The curriculum adopted was learning.com. It's the name of a web-based product that provides access to standard aligned lessons, allows for delivery in a variety of settings, available in English and Spanish, and also a home-based component. Moving into K-6 general music, you see the core curriculum spotlight on music and some of the reasons for why it was selected, standard alignment, instructional strategies, opportunities to listen, speak, sing, read, and write. And as I had a small hand in putting this presentation together, which mostly entailed me asking questions from my own edification so that I'd have enough information to stand up here and do this pretty well. One of the things that struck me across the board was just the amount of mindfulness given to integration. You see that here in the third bullet with opportunities to listen, speak, read, and write. And songs are in English, non-English, and some even include ASL. So continued recommendations for music, and this one isn't so cut and dried in terms of, so we had the K-6 recommendations. Some of these recommendations go down as far as 4th grade, others start at 5th, and then you see where 7-12 is delineated. And you see a number of things here. Music through performance, essential repertoire libraries, for choir, orchestra, jazz, and we did receive some clarification that repertoire library also includes band, so that should have been in the presentation and was not. That was my mistake. Methods books, voices in concert, and again you see some of the recommendations, and in particular I think the vertical alignment deserves mentioning. Moving on to high school social studies, 10th grade world history, published by Teachers Curriculum Institute. And again, you see it aligns to the state learning standards as well as the C3 framework. The C3 framework stands for college, career, and civic life. It's published by the National Social Studies Association, and what it does is it integrates ELA standards as well as these three key concepts: college, career, and civic life, into social studies content. So again, you see a real theme around integration. 11th grade U.S. history, McGraw-Hill history and geography. So some continued recommendations, AP U.S. History and 12th grade Civics, and you see the same alignment to the C3 framework throughout. Continuing with sociology and psychology, standard aligned, provides opportunities for critical thinking and analysis, and academic language scaffolds, and what that means, as I drilled into, is a concept called language frames, which really facilitates the ability to discuss using academic terminology. And AP Psychology, published by Bedford Freeman Worth. You see the same alignment. and based on the College Board's placement standards and format. So our next steps, our implementation plan, purchase and receive materials, develop curriculum and assessment guides and scope and sequence guides where appropriate, and professional development starting in August and ongoing. So you see our estimated budget for technology, for high school social studies, and for K-12 music, and the total estimated cost. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the board?
So thank you, Mr. Bowles. This has been a big body of work over 2 years that we've worked on this. Are we done?
That's a great question. So let me give you a variety of answers. I suppose the short answer is no.
We're never done.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned that. I walked upstairs tonight between the recognition and the board meeting, and there were a number of teacher groups working tonight on alignment to a scope and sequence. So, you know, once we identify what we want, that's really just the start of the process in terms of scope and sequence work, curriculum alignment work, continuous professional development. In terms of fulfilling the intent of the negotiated agreement, we're done with the exception of elementary social studies. Both the PAE and the district felt that and it was really teacher input led, believe that we need to take some time next year to do that piece. So in terms of formally adopting instructional materials, very close to done. In terms of ensuring those materials align to standards and ultimately assessments and how all those pieces work together, we're just on the front end of a really great journey.
Okay, good. And so now we've got to put together a schedule to start reviewing these, correct? So that we don't wait 8 years or 7 years to do this again. Is that in the process? Are we at a point now where we can start doing that?
We have a preliminary draft of what the next several years will look like through 22-23. We also have some preliminary financial figures affixed to that so that we can in effect make sure that we have the appropriate savings account to continue to purchase upgrades, licenses, anything that we identify as a gap with regard to instructional materials as well as instructional materials themselves. So we're actually very far along in that process. To my knowledge, it's the first time that the curriculum department and the fiscal department really worked hand in hand in putting those pieces together, and we're real excited to make that presentation as a joint effort in, I believe, the month of July.
So I know we spent several $1 million last year, and we are spending another $1 million this year. And hopefully we should have some budget there that continues to grow, hopefully with that. I know we took some funds from other things to make this happen, and hopefully we can start giving some attention back to those things. I'm guessing we'll start doing that now. So.
Right. There was a lot of thoughtful budgetary consideration for preparing for the last 2 years, but also, like Mr. Bowles alluded to, in preparation for support of the curriculum review cycle over time. Right. So the document that Eric is alluding to calendars out or lets us know how much money each year do we need to be setting aside so that we can fully fund the curriculum review cycle and renewal process. And so we're fully prepared to do that. And like Mr. Bowles said, we'll be bringing the appropriate documents to the board that require action and or an update.
So thank you for your work, and thank you to the committee members who are here and those who have served for the past 2 years. This has been a great thing, and hopefully it continues on a good path. So thank you.
Well, and you're welcome, and I'd like to acknowledge that, you know, my work is really to be the mouthpiece around the initiative, and the good work has been done by our folks in the audience this evening.
And I think another thing that's worth noting is this is only a step in the direction. There's so much work still to be done this summer. So we appreciate the work, the many, many hours you've already put in. We appreciate the work that you're going to do in the future in implementing this curriculum and creating lesson plans and all of those things. So we know this is a big haul. We know we've asked a lot from the teachers with this for the last 2 years, and we so appreciate all that you've done.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'd love to hear if any of the committee members here would like to comment on their experience, the process, the result. Love to hear if you have any comments that you could share with us. And if not, that's
Sure,
okay.
they were all this quiet in the committee meeting.
Yeah. I did have a question, as we don't have to pull it up, I guess, but on the technology, it seemed really timely because I know one of the things that you pointed out was that there's a home-based component. And with it being the end of the school year, I'd love to see a focus on some of these things that our kids can do over the summer, right? I know we have a lot of opportunity for that. I don't have a good grasp of exactly what's available for which group of students, but for example, math, I know there's a SumDog program that my kids use that actually kind of follows where students are at with their math skills, and I'd love to see us encourage, and I would encourage right now that our students do that over the summer every day, in addition to reading, obviously, and we have reading programs through the libraries, and anyone can do those. There's no cost. They can go to the Pasco branch or the West Pasco branch of the Mid-Columbia Libraries every day all summer and check out books for free and use computers for free. There's no requirement. So I don't know if you're prepared to comment on this, but I'm curious as to what are the resources right now that we have that our students can access over the summer as far as like things they use during the school year, things that they can use at home and access on computers to continue their learning.
Well, I'm prepared to comment on that generally for sure. One of the things that we took a look at was we've had a backpack program in the past that we devoted a significant amount of resource to. This year, we're excited to be opening a variety of our elementary libraries over the course of the summer in conjunction with our with the ability to access summer feeding program, and so we have a number of academic resources, including computer-based resources that any of our kids can access all summer long. It's the first summer, to my knowledge, that we've done that across a variety of our elementary sites, and we're going to see how it grows, and to the extent we can grow that program in the future, I think opening those libraries in conjunction with summer feeding is a great avenue to access exactly what you articulated.
Where will parents have access to that information on which programs that they're online that they'll have access to, as well as which programs they'll have, which libraries are open and things?
And that piece I'm not prepared to speak to tonight, but I can get you the specifics by tomorrow. Shelley Hatch and her team have really led that work. I don't know if Kyle is in the audience and knows. I don't want to put you on the spot, but
we sent out flyers today.
Okay.
And I know Dreambox is available for all students as well.
Yeah. We can get you a comprehensive response.
Yes.
Yeah, it'd be nice to advertise that through the district so parents are well aware of it. So, but I will go dig through my children's backpacks.
Thank you, Mr. Bowles. And thank you to the committees that and the people who served on those committees for the hard work that they did. At this time, quickly, we'll open it up to the rest of the public if you have any questions or comments on this for the board. With no questions or comments from the community, we'll move on to the next report, Report 9B. We'll also have Mr. Bowles introduce this.
Yes, and it's my pleasure tonight not to actually go through these slides that were brilliantly put together by Heidi Thompson. I'll introduce Heidi, who coordinates our efforts in the district around positive behavior interventions and supports, and she's a fantastic presenter, so it'll be a big upgrade from what you just heard, and I'll let her take it away.
Good evening, Board President Lehrman, Superintendent Whitney, and members of the board. I'm delighted tonight to give you a status report on positive behavior interventions and supports. When successfully implemented on all of our campuses, PBIS will have a significant impact on 3 of the 5 outrageous outcomes. The outcome of 3rd graders being able to read on grade level in their language of instruction, the ability for 9th graders to pass algebra by 9th grade, and 9th graders being on track for graduation by the end of the school year. Previous board presentations have evaluated the rationale and benchmarks that are cited here that seek to improve graduation rates by committing to reducing exclusionary discipline practices and improving attendance. To boil it down to its very simplest terms, Showing up in school ready to learn is a necessary precondition for academic learning. Conversely, if students are not present in school due to suspensions or expulsions, they cannot learn. And if school does not create a safe, predictable learning environment, academic progress will be stilted. This familiar slide reminds us of the reality that 5.82%, or 840 of our students last year, missed school due to the consequences of their own behavior. We know that higher discipline exclusions are linked to dropout rates, and much of what we know about Washington exclusionary practices came from the research done in 2012 by the Appleseed Foundation. Among other findings, suspensions and expulsions were believed to send messages of alienation, low expectations, and overall disengagement from school, which is another one of our outrageous outcomes, that all of our kids are engaged. Recommendations from this Appleseed report ended up feeding the legislation of ESSB 5946, which is the new law on exclusionary practices. We know that eventually, students that are expelled and suspended will fall further behind, and then they'll just stop attending. Even for students who continue to attend, the patterns of negative behavior prevent their engagement in learning for the students and for their peers. Thankfully, behavior is learned, just like academics. This means behavior is something that we can teach, just like academics. And that's what we're doing with PBIS. PBIS is a framework. It's not a program. It helps us examine school responses to student behavior in a multi-tiered system of support. Research teaches us that it'll take 3 to 5 years to fully implement PBIS on our campuses. Campuses always begin with Tier 1 universal implementation, walking through the established process to create each campus's individual framework. This takes time. It's not as simple as a boxed program with ready-made videos and lessons, but research shows that it's far more effective and more culturally responsive. Most students will respond to the Tier 1 universal system that intentionally teaches clear, consistent expectations and skills, then continuously reinforces those expectations and skills. School expectations, much like the board's outrageous outcome, provide clear vision of what we're striving to achieve. By recognizing students when they meet these expectations and skills, we have the added benefit of providing recognition, validation, and leadership opportunities for the many students who show up every day prepared to learn, but might not be our highest achievers. Over time, when implemented correctly, the system builds a culture of that safe, predictable learning environment where positive behavior is the norm. Also falling into Tier 1 are school-wide programs like bullying prevention, social-emotional learning, and anything else that supports students in learning positive behaviors. As part of PBIS implementation, we're glad to report that we have put materials for social-emotional learning and bullying prevention into the hands of our school counselors to support the work that they do to build behavioral schools in our classrooms and in small groups. Some students will require Tier 2 group-level interventions to learn appropriate behavior, things like check-in and check-out and small groups with the counselor. And a few of our students will need very intensive, individualized Tier 3 support. For PBIS to be successful, Tier 1 must be built with fidelity before schools begin to focus on Tier 2 and 3 supports. When we teach behavior, just like academics, there is certainly still an accountability component. However, there is a necessary philosophical shift from a focus on consequences toward a focus on interventions that help struggling students to learn behavior. This shift moves us from exclusionary discipline practices into practices that attempt to keep students engaged in instruction and to consider alternatives to suspension. There's also an immediate shift that's required to begin to focus on students meeting expectations in the classroom, away from catching every negative behavior. These two philosophical shifts play a very central role in changing the campus culture and creating a safe, predictable learning environment. Several current and past initiatives have helped to inform this philosophical shift. The work of Eric Jensen on teaching with poverty in mind, and the current ongoing work of Robin Henley on how adverse childhood experiences have shaped the brain, making cooperative behavior a more patient work. I'm pleased to have Robin on the Advisory Council, helping to inform our behavioral practices in Pasco. So where are we with implementation? There's a leader identified at each campus that receives ongoing monthly professional development. These leaders help to develop our district PBIS vision, represented by the graphic here. What I love about this graphic is it can be read in any direction. When we wrote it, it started at the bottom. We create a culture of positive social responsibility to promote academic success by strengthening relationships. But you can just as easily read it in any direction. By strengthening relationships, we create that culture to promote academic success. It's really quite a comprehensive vision, and I think it overlaps very nicely with our outrageous outcomes for our district. Oh, sorry, I'm not quite done there. Every school has a PBIS team that attended initial Tier 1 system training for 2 days last August. Each team developed their own purpose, a matrix of expectations and skills, a reinforcement system, a flow chart, and a web page. Our 3 high schools, Delta, Pasco, and Chiawana, have taken an extra year to keep working on building those implementation efforts because it does take longer to roll out at a high school, but they all plan to roll out this fall. New Horizons, of course, is already fairly advanced in this process. K-8 counselors, nutrition services, and transportation have also been trained in PBIS systems as they impact their functions. And we're using assessments and data to track our progress and monitor student behavior. Every campus has the school-wide information system, SWIS, which was developed by the University of Oregon to capture 7 key pieces of behavioral data from office discipline referrals. It captures the average number of referrals per day, times of the day and days of the week, location, grade, specific students, and types of behavior. Our teams can use this data to respond either with school-wide support, for example, more supervision at recess or lunch, or target problem areas on smaller scales, for example, a problem in a 5th grade classroom, maybe with bullying. This year I've joked about starting Tennis Shoe Tuesdays because there tends to be a spike on a lot of our elementary and middle schools on Tuesdays. So by having this good behavioral data, we don't have to guess about how to use our resources. Each team completed the standardized team implementation checklist in March or April of this year. At that time, this chart shows the percentage of implementation the schools have self-reported on this assessment for Tier 1. As you can see, some schools have reached the 80% mark, which is what we're looking at to look at deeper measures to determine if schools are ready to start building their 2-tier system on that strong Tier 1 foundation. In April and May, following the TIC assessments, I worked with 19 of our 22 school campuses, so excluding Pasco High, Chiawana, Delta, and then I also didn't look at the Parent Education Center for this, to conduct the Tiered Fidelity Inventory, which examines implementation through a different lens than the self-report, and this works to validate the other measure. It's our belief that at least 3 of our schools will be ready to begin Tier 2 training by mid-October, and that 50% of our campuses in Pasco will be ready by this point in May 31st of next year to start building their Tier 2 systems. Campuses that are not moving on to Tier 2 status will increase their Tier 1 scores by at least 20 points next year.
Heidi, what did the 80%, what are you measuring that on? I've seen it on several slides here, but how do you measure when a school is 60, 70, 80%? What does that mean?
The beauty is we put the data in off their survey. They'll put in a 0, 1, or a 2 for level of implementation, and we put it into the computer, and it yields these lovely reports. So it calculates percentage of Tier 1 implementation. So 80% means 80% of the pieces of Tier 1 are in place the way they should be. It's very unusual for a school to ever reach 100% of Tier 1, but it's as they can start building Tier 2 along with Tier 1 once they reach about 80%.
Who responds to those surveys? Is that teachers, or is that administration, or is that both?
It's the PBIS team that's been trained to work on implementation efforts together that respond to these surveys. And when I did the TFI, I did that with the teams. The TIC they do by themselves. So there's that validation effort then.
So is there a team then at every single school?
Yes.
And who, sorry, I might have just not heard, who's on the team? Teachers and administrators and counselors?
There must be an administrator. That's a requirement that every team has an administrator, so that could be the AP or a principal. There are a number of teachers. There's usually one special ed person that's on there. There's almost always a counselor, although it could be a school psychologist in the place of a counselor. There's usually a para who's involved with some data entry that's a part of the team. It's a pretty comprehensive team that tries to round out, and in fact, that's one of the measures that makes up the 80% is the formation of the members of the team. There's also supposed to be a parent on the Tier 1 team. Most of our schools for this last year did not have that piece met, which is part of what kept many of them from reaching 90%. But they are all expected to have a parent on the team for fall of this year. That's one of the big rocks for this next year is more parent and community involvement. These key 4 actions from a previous board presentation overlap very nicely with the University of Oregon's core components of PBIS implementation that I added the column to the right. When University of Oregon first came out with, before they even called it PBIS, they were asked by teachers who were pulling their hair out with behavior disorder programs, we need help with interventions. And Oregon came to the rescue and said, here's the 5 things you need to do if you're going to do this right. You need to focus your attention on prevention, use research-based practices, data-based decision-making, school-wide systems, and social skills instruction. Well, I was very pleased to go through the key actions from previous reports and find that so many of the things that we've already committed to do with the board overlap so very nicely with these key recommendations. For example, the first one is that we're looking at that continuum of instruction and intervention, which is that attention on prevention that's just a key component here in the research-based practices. Also that we're based on student data, the data-based decision-making, that we're looking at social emotional growth as part of our connecting teachers, leaders, and staff, and the social skills instruction component. And then the early warning system to intervene in at-risk students. And I'm pleased to announce that for this fall, we'll introduce universal screeners after about the first 6 weeks of school to try and capture kids who have internal and external behaviors to ensure that those kids are getting into the social emotional learning groups that they need to with the counselors. Previously, we have been able to use Swiss data to capture them based on external behaviors, but we really haven't been able to catch the kids that struggle with anxiety or depression unless they were referred by a teacher on their own. So this will give us a much more comprehensive and universal practice for that. So what's next? By increasing our staff capacity, equipping principals and principal supervisors for oversight, and by using these data tools, we can work to address our current weaknesses in classroom systems, function-based interventions, data use, and community parent involvement. Each school team will use their data assessments and staff surveys this summer to create their action plan for fall. We still have much work ahead, but are encouraged at some of the initial data from the schools who have worked hard to implement PBIS. I could share data about a school who reports they've only had 1/3 of the discipline they had last year, or another school who had 1/3 of the suspensions by Christmas this year than they had by Christmas last year. But perhaps 2 of the most compelling stories actually come from a parent and a custodian. The parent attended one of our trainings on PBIS at home. She smiled as she reported how her daughter had recently caught her off guard saying, "I like the way you look at me when I'm talking, Mommy." This sentence frame is one of our commonly used recognition of positive behavior phrases, and it reflects that our teachers made the switch into recognizing positive behavior in the classroom, and that the student has made the recognition of praise as an important part of developing positive behavior. As for the custodian, I was doing the TFI walkthrough at one of our elementary schools, and I just asked a female student to tell me what her PBIS acronym stood for at her school. And she rattled it off like she was telling me her name. And as I was beaming with pride, a custodian walked up behind her and said, "I'll tell you what PBIS stands for here. It stands for that I get a clean cafeteria. This is the best system we've ever had." That is one very happy employee with some great job satisfaction. I'm sure that every campus has its own stories, and I encourage the board to continue to ask them. Thank you for the opportunity to share just this tiny glimpse into our excitement over PBIS in Pasco. I'm confident that PBIS will play a significant role in reaching our outrageous outcomes by creating the safe, predictable learning environments that keep kids engaged in school. Thank you.
Questions or comments for Ms. Thompson from the board? Thank you, Heidi.
Yeah, thank you. Great presentation. This is a great model. Obviously, anyone that has children or has worked with young children knows that if you focus on positive things and reinforce that, you'll get more of that. If you focus on negatives and constantly criticize bad behavior, you never really get to the point where you teach and enforce good behavior. So it's a great principle. My one fear, I have a couple questions, and one of my fears is that we ask too much of teachers. Like if we measure referral reporting and suspensions, expulsions, and those are going down, one of the reasons I can imagine that they would go down is that our teachers are expected or asked to tolerate more bad behavior and hence don't report as much or refer as much and are asked to keep students that really need maybe some more serious interventions, but in an effort to be a positive team member for their school, tolerate poor, disrespectful behavior, especially I'm talking as our students get older. And so what is the feedback that you've received from teachers, and is that happening? Is that a fear? And how are we addressing that?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. Part of PBIS does have an accountability system, which each campus develops a flow chart, and I didn't really put that up here and walk anyone through it, but generally the flow chart starts off where you've decided which things are going to be your majors that are sent directly to the office and which things are going to be minors that are handled in the classroom. Most of the time, that majors and minors activity is done with the entire staff. In a few cases, it might be done with the PBIS team, but in most cases, that was done with the whole staff. From those, even for the minor behaviors, there's a flow chart of how the teacher is asked to respond to behaviors. They're initially asked to hang out in exactly what you were talking about, the non-responses, because when we acknowledge negative behavior, we really are, in many cases, especially for our many attention seekers, paying off that negative behavior. On the other hand, the old model of teaching is a little bit like a very advanced and very overlong played game of whack-a-mole at Chuck E. Cheese. Do you know the one I'm talking about? Where you're attending to negative behavior and just hitting down everyone that pops up. And really that's the natural response. When you're standing in a classroom and things aren't going right, that is what stands out. It's quite a training to be able to attune to the positive behavior first, but that's really what we're asking our teachers to do. First, you attend to those. When it is no longer you've got to address the negative behavior, we're asking them then to only redirect once. So instead of the 17 redirections, please sit down. I need you to get your materials out. I need you to stop talking. You know, that constant redirection. They redirect once, they reteach once, which is a one-on-one conversation. They document that. Then they decide on their campus kind of what comes next in their flow chart. But generally it'll look like an intervention, and then it might be either a para that comes in and does a reflection. It might be any number of things that happen next before it becomes a minor office referral. So it is still a process for those behaviors. It's a lot more of an organized process, and instead of having to do the constant whack-a-mole, it is less actually dealing with negative behavior than they should have to do the other way. Does that answer the question?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good lead into my other question or comment, and it has to do with the resources we provided each school in terms of administration and specifically counselors. So I'd like to see the board and the district establish a standard where we have one counselor per X number of students. Like from what I've gathered, 300 to 400 is reasonable. So our schools that are 800 have to have 2 full-time counselors. And this really fits in nice because we focused a lot on budgeting practices and putting money where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck. And in visiting the schools and meeting with teachers and counselors, I really think that is where we need to make an emphasis that if we're going to devote money to get the biggest bang for our buck in our district, one of the ways is by dedicating that type of commitment to school counselors, so that all of our schools that have 700 or 800 kids have 2 full-time counselors all the time. Because if we're gonna ask the teachers to refer and then we don't have enough resources to address those, and we're asking the school counselor to provide social emotional learning groups, character education training, bullying prevention training, it's the job satisfaction of that counselor goes way down, and they go home every day demoralized because they cannot possibly meet all those expectations. So I don't know when the right time to discuss that is, but it fits in nicely here, and I think we just have to establish a standard that if we're going to have these big schools, we have to provide the resources so that our teachers have the support they need, the students have the support they need, and that we can enable the counselors to do the job we're asking them to do without overwhelming them, because that's how we're going to drive them away, and then we'll be in an even worse situation.
You speak immediately to my heart. My 2 years before serving in the behavior intervention coach role for Pasco were in school counseling in Florida, Texas, and California. And I can tell you the years when I had I was mostly secondary. I didn't do any elementary counseling at the time. But the years when I had smaller caseloads, I knew the parents of the students, not just the students. I knew more than their names. I knew what they needed. They knew how to come to me. There was a different dynamic, and we could really meet needs in a different way with smaller caseloads. So you speak to my heart when you say that. I will say PBIS, I did have the opportunity last summer when I met with the K-8 counselors to work a little bit with them on looking at their role through both the American School Counselor Association lens and how that lines up with PBIS. And in some cases, the counselors have worked to tweak their role a little bit so they're a little bit more proactive in how they're dealing with social emotional learning skills. So instead of doing as much one-on-one on demand, there's a little bit more planning and direction around early intervention and prevention, and then responsive services and groups throughout the year. So thank you for
Great.
that.
Thank you for all your comments. So President Lehrman, Ms. Whitney, I don't know the protocol for this. I'm still a newish, younger board member, but I'd love to have a report or some sort of evaluation of that and have us address and make some goals and real established standards coming up so that we can meet that expectation.
So if I may just clarify that as a staff, we have worked this year with the prototypical school funding model. We've been meeting with principals and looking at our staffing allocations, not only for counselors, but across the board, to make sure that we're providing an adequate, and if not adequate, a rich staffing allocation for our buildings so that we can meet the goals, the outrageous outcome goals. So where we are now is waiting for the legislature to make their final decision about what their closure is going to look like, and then we can make some decisions from there. But it's absolutely an interest of the district and of our principals and of the superintendent to make sure that our district has the staffing necessary to meet the needs of our students and do the heavy lifting of these 100% goals. So we've already started that process, and we're just a little bit in a holding pattern waiting for the legislature to make some decisions.
That's okay. I think whatever the state does, we make it a priority. I think we should find the money. I don't care what the state decisions are. We have to find the money in our budget, make it a priority in our budgeting decisions. I don't want to wait for the state to do anything because, like Mr. Christensen said, they are woefully failing in many ways, and that's a dead-end road if we're waiting for that. So let's make it a priority in our planning.
Ms. Thompson, I have a question on, so we talk about PBIS, and I've seen the positive outcomes of that in my kid's school. I went and listened to you talk about using PBIS in the home. So I think it sounds like a good foundation, but my question ties right into what Dr. Richardson asked, and it's how do you know when to go from PBIS being positive to some kind of consequences or intervention? And I heard that each building is going to create a flow chart. We've talked as a board and as a district of becoming more consistent across the district in many areas. Is there any reason why there shouldn't be a flow chart district-wide? Is there a benefit to having different flow charts for each school?
Yes. How schools are going to allocate their resources and who's going to respond at different levels may look very different on different campuses. And remembering that each school, this is not a packaged program where we can do the same thing from one campus to the other. It really is designed to just, every campus walks through the process, and then they come up with a product that looks very, very different campus to campus. It's culturally responsive to the culture that they're looking to create, which should look different on every campus. I know we want some universals, and there are some universals. There will always be a flow chart. There will always be an expectations matrix. A student who transfers from one school to the other will know to ask for expectations and will still receive reinforcement and will still have some of the same praise statements heard, but the process will still look a little different for the adults on the campus.
So I understand the process looking different, but I guess my question goes more towards bullying or interrupting classes. And I heard you say that each school define what they consider to be their majors, and I assume majors means when do you go to the counselor, when do you go to the principal, when do you contact the parent, when do you do this? I know we have policies, we have district policies, and I know we have this framework that we're starting to work on, but is there some kind of, I don't know what the tool is, where we can create it district-wide so that there's clear expectation for each school about when the teachers take what action with discipline? Or is it all building level and it's going to be different at each school?
There's pieces that are always in common. There's a standard best practice that any time a child is sent out of the classroom for a behavior-related incident, that there's a parent phone call made home. That's a universal. That's not a negotiable. But whether or not it's a para that meets with that student and does a reflection, or whether it's a buddy teacher that meets with that student and does a reflection, that's very much a campus-based decision. When a teacher decides to go out of the positive box and do their first redirection, that's very much up to teacher discretion. A teacher that wants to live in the positive box all the time might be able to pull that off in their classroom with very, very little substantial disruption. But the teacher that feels the need to respond to negative behavior at least has a process to do that that's clear on their campus. Does that help? Did I answer that?
A little bit. I guess I'd just say I hope that, I know that you and other district staff working on this will make as much of this consistent across the district as possible and make sense and leave what should be left up to the buildings. But we just want to hear, we hear emails from concerned parents on bullying and processes and consistency, and I think we're making strides, but as long as we continue to become more consistent across the district, I think it can be nothing but positive.
I also think as we capture clear data, we can also respond better to those incidents as they arrive. I mean, when we see that we've got a 5th grade class with bullying issues, we know that we can send our counselor in with their new materials to address that issue. So the pieces all kind of come together, but they're all brand new pieces for us. We're very excited at the progress that's been made this year, but we still have a lot of work to do.
Thank you.
I'm thrilled with this program. I appreciate your work. I kind of live in this world because I'm a foster parent, and I have learned that raising my children and raising a foster child is very different. And I think that's also a piece that goes from school to school. When you have higher levels of poverty, when you have higher levels of those things that are really difficult for children to deal with, you're going to have more discipline problems. Children react in very different ways, but often when life at home is difficult, it comes out in their behavior in various different ways. So I appreciate what you're doing. I feel like I kind of live this tier 1, 2, and oftentimes 3 with one child I have in my home right now, and I'm grateful for the things that I have learned through attentive counselors and therapists, and I'm glad to see that those things are integrated, because a lot of times these children need to be understood. I was raised very much I had incredible parents, but it was like, you screw up, you get punished. It works great for kids that, are eating 3 meals a day and have consistent love, and that's not, consistent love, consistent discipline, consistent. And some parents want to provide that and can't, and other parents, aren't present because of things that they're dealing with. There are so many things and so many variables that don't give that to a child, and that can look different throughout our campuses. So I do understand that. I appreciate this. I do want people to understand this isn't okay, you deal with the problem because for the teachers. This is because I've learned as a parent, it makes your life easier. By learning this, my life has been so much easier, especially as a foster parent, because instead of perpetrating the problem, you correct it, and all of a sudden you have less problems. So this is, I feel like, a gift to the teachers when it's implemented correctly. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
One more question for you. I really enjoyed when I came to a school and saw you speak to parents about how to implement this at home. And I saw one of your weaknesses here that you wrote down was community and parent involvement. That's a great step towards hitting that group of parent that's willing to come to your training and see that. Is there a benefit to putting some kind of link on the district website and really talking through this process and how it fits in with district discipline policies and anti-bullying, anti-harassment, and tie it all together? And is that something that you might be working on next year for us, or is it further out in the future?
It's done and ready to launch.
Awesome. Cool.
I'm just waiting for the website to go live.
All right. Proactive and innovative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Thompson from the board? Any questions or comments for the board from the community on this topic? All right. Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Look forward to seeing that on the website, and thanks for the great work. All right, next we have report item 9B, a 2017 bond update. We have Ms. Michelle Whitney.
Good evening, Board President Lehrman, members of the board. Last week, during a special study session, you heard from members of the community builders and received a recommendation regarding projects for a potential November bond election from Joe Clark, our MGT consultant. The purpose of this presentation tonight is to acknowledge that work and then talk about scheduling and what the schedule looks like related to decisions with the board. So just to review briefly, we've been working on really 2 facilities projects simultaneously. So beginning in November of last year, we began working with MGT of America on conducting an assessment of our facilities to serve as the foundation to a long-range facilities master plan. At the same time while that was occurring, the district ran a bond in February. Unfortunately, that bond did not pass. So as a result, we asked MGT to work with the community and a community builders advisory group to really do 2 things. One, continue working on the long-range facilities master planning process, but then also layering on top of that process an advisement to the board around how to proceed with a bond for November of 2017. So by necessity, because of an August 1st filing deadline to get that on the November ballot, we could not wait for the full long-term facilities management plan to be completed and meet that the ask of the board to consider a November bond election. So this slide shows you in more detail what the process looked like, and also gives you really kind of a sense of that compressed timeline that I just described. I do want to acknowledge and thank the community builders, some of whom are in the audience tonight. So if you're a part of that community builder, please accept my gratitude for your commitment to the process. There were also about 400 community members that either participated by attending community input events, we had 4 of those, and or participating in an online or paper survey process. So we really appreciate the community participating in those ways. We also wanted to recognize that this is a short timeline. The turnaround between the February bond election for a November bond election, compress the timeline, and it is complex work. We also want to recognize and acknowledge our commitment to continuing the long-range planning process, as we just believe that 10 to 20-year facilities, long-term facilities management plan is critical to the operation of the district long-term. So here you can see, since you received the information from Joe Clark last Tuesday, we now have some, we'll now have some time for you to carefully review and analyze all the data and information. To do this and to give you an extended time to look at this as a board, we'll be contacting you to schedule a board retreat. We also need to allow enough time for bond council to draft a resolution prior to your approval as a board. So this graphic really represents what that timeline will look like between now and the time that the August 1 filing deadline will occur. So these are the next steps. Valerie will be reaching out to set up a time for a retreat. We'll also need to schedule the 2 action items so that we make the August 1 filing deadline should the November bond election be our target. Since summer schedules are starting to get really busy, I know that you all have commitments. This might mean that we may need to schedule a special board meeting between now and the deadline for filing. So just wanted to make you aware of the timeline and the potential requirements of a retreat and/or special board meetings between now and the August 1 filing deadline. So with that, I would like to say thank you and again express my gratitude to the Community Builders Advisory Group, our community, for participating, and Joe Clark, who is our MGT consultant, for working with us through this process. I'd like to also acknowledge Randy Nunemaker, who's been really critical in providing some technical support for Joe Clark through this process. So with that, I would answer any questions.
Yeah, I'll open it up for questions to Ms. Whitney, and then I think we'll open it up for questions, comments to the board from the audience, and then we'll give the board one more chance to say anything, respond how they'd like. So any questions, comments for Ms. Whitney?
You know, we've made, at least I have made personal requests for more information. So I think that a lot of the questions that I've had and talked personally with Joe Clark, where, you know, I think we're all kind of doing our homework, getting more of this information. We're looking forward to the retreat so we can really discuss this. So I appreciate the information we have and the opportunity to discuss this in the future. So thank you.
Do we have any questions or comments for the board from the audience? The microphone's open.
Good evening, Board President Lehrman and members of the board, Superintendent Whitney. My name's Nathan Grimm, Pasco School District taxpayer, spouse of a teacher, and non-parent. So I have a unique perspective on things. I'm also a 20-year construction professional, so I have a construction management degree and 20 years of experience in industry building things. So this kind of thing is right up my alley. I'm a member of the Community Builders Group. I have a viewpoint that's mine, and I don't want anyone else to have to own that, but that is, our group did not come to a recommendation. We were presented with 2 options from the district's consultant, one of which was not an option to take more time and develop a long-term plan before we jump into a November election. And I know from personal discussions with other members of the group that they were waiting for that option when we were given an opportunity to raise our hands and vote, and that was not presented. I have grave concerns that we're going too fast. I know we have overcrowding and it's immediate need, but the risk is that we fail another bond and we're another year or 2 behind. That is obviously a decision that's up to you guys, and that's why you get paid the big bucks. I think we can come to a consensus and comprehensive community decision, I just think is going to take more time than 3 meetings. There was lots of great discussion. I don't feel like that it was a waste of anyone's time. I think it was all productive. I just feel like it's a rush to say that we have a recommendation and a path forward. I believe we still have the same opinions in the community that we did 8 months ago when we struggled to come up with a bond scenario that would be acceptable to the entire board. And we didn't, and then we failed to bond. So my biggest fear is that we fail another bond and we're more time behind trying to get our ducks back in a row to find a bond that the community will accept than we are if we take the appropriate amount of time now and possibly forego something in November. There's other options short of a full-fledged $100 million bond that was presented. I think you can look at only doing the projects that the district has filed D-forms with the state for. I think there was 2 of them, but those are conversations to have with them. So again, I've talked to most of you, sent all of you an email, reiterate my position that rushing into it is just as bad as not making the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Any other questions or comments from the audience? Additional board discussion?
So I've got some questions, Ms. Whitney. Just so are the community builders scheduled to meet again? We don't have a date at this time.
We don't have a date at this time. I think that the intention was to get a board retreat scheduled with you, and then based on that, we would get a path forward. So as soon as we can get you guys scheduled at a retreat, get you the information you needed, and have a conversation with you, then we would be able to move forward in that regard.
So can I ask, what do you see happening? Board retreat, are we going to give the community builders direction? Are we going to give Mr. Clark direction?
The board retreat will be an opportunity for you 5 as a board to discuss the information from the community builders and get clear about that and give the district some direction about what you'd like to see happen. So this will be a board retreat, not a combined board and community builders meeting.
Right, okay, but coming out of that will be some direction. I guess my question, so are you expecting us that we're either going to accept this proposal that has been forwarded or not? Or are we going to give them, we'll come up with something that we can hand back to them and say, please go look at this, and then the community builders will
all of those could be an option, right?
Okay.
So as a board, you could choose to accept the recommendation that was presented to you during the combined board study session with the community builders. You could ask us to take information back to the community builders to do X amount of work. I mean, there's a lot of varying outcomes to the retreat. I just want to point out that if we're going to do November, August 1, we have to have the resolution filed, which means 2 action items prior to that. So we just need to be mindful of the timeline and move forward in a way that makes sense to you as a board and the community builders and reflects the values of the community.
Thank you.
So the retreat that we're talking about, like all of our meetings where we have more than two board members present, is an open public meeting. That retreat, or pending availability of all board members, we're planning to have probably next Monday or Tuesday. We've gotten an email asking for availability. So if we're all available next Monday or Tuesday, sometime next week, we'll get together for a board retreat. It'll be posted on the website. It'll be an open public meeting. The board will be able to go through the options presented to us by the community builders and ask additional questions of the staff and have board discussion and determine a path forward. And I think we all thank the community builders. We all thank those people in the community that attended took part in that. I understand there's different perspectives coming out of that. Thank you to Mr. Grimm for his perspective. And people tell us we have a hard job, you know, making decisions like this. And when I look at it, I'd say it's a hard job, but we have so much need here for facilities in Pasco that if we pass a bond, if we run a bond and get any facilities, I think that we win, and we did a good job. And so we can't go wrong with building facilities in Pasco, and hopefully the community and the board and the district all come together, and we can have that discussion and we move forward in a positive way.
Thank you. I just want to thank Mr. Grimm for your comments and participation in the Community Builders group. All that input has been helpful to me. The timeline that Ms. Whitney showed, you know, we started this process a year and a half ago, and everything throughout that whole process has influenced, you know, how I'm viewing this and how I think about it. I appreciate what you said, a bond that community can support. To me, that's the overriding question. You know, what will our community support? And I don't have an expectation that a group like that would have a unanimous consensus, that there would be all 30 members or whatever, however many there were, agreeing on the exact plan. Even just 5 members of the board, we all have different ideas and different things. So, but I appreciate the work and the input. It's been, MGT Consulting has provided us with great additional information and data that's helpful for us to consider, and we'll look at all that, look at the work of the Community Builders Group, look at all the discussions we've had over the last year and a half, and I agree with Mr. Lehrman, we need more facilities. In my background, I have 4 students in Pasco schools right now, and have had students in schools since we moved here 6 years ago. And as I mentioned earlier, I've visited all the schools, every school for the last 2 years, and I work every day with students in our schools and have patients at all of our schools. So I feel like I have a good grasp of what our needs are, and we definitely are in need of facilities. And I agree with Mr. Lehrman, any facility is going to be great for us, and we just need more space, and the time is of the essence. I wish we had more time, but we've had a very large need for a long time that's been unmet, and so but we'll take all that information and consider that when we decide on a bond proposal.
All right, I guess we already asked for audience comments. Thank you. And next we'll move on, agenda item number 10. We have no action items this evening. Agenda item number 11, we have the consent agenda. Ms. Thornton, were you going to say something about the policies briefly? So consent agenda item 11C.
Item 11C are policies that are that we're asking that the Policy 11C are policies that we're asking the board to approve on first reading. These are policies that we've received a recommendation from OSPI through our consolidated program review that we need to have language in place that's more consistent with the WASDA model policies. And so these are being presented to the board on the consent agenda. Per policy 1310, the board can waive second reading and approve on first reading.
Thank you. Yeah, I spoke with Ms. Thornton the other day, and she was going to give a brief update on that because, like she said, in general, we have a first reading as a report and then a second reading as an action item, and the board's had these policies in their package for review, and so they're on the consent agenda this evening. So on the consent agenda, we have district policy revisions, first reading and approval for policies 2162, policies 3115, 3121, 3208, 3210, 4221, and 4315, along with policy 5011. We also have approval of career and technical education 3-year plans. We have the Pasco High School bell clock and intercom replacement project, approval of the Valbridge property advisors to provide real estate appraisal services, bid approval for the senior center alterations project, and authorization to enter into contract with MH Construction, approval of Pacific Mobile Structures for the portable relocation costs. We have overnight student travel for Delta High School ASB to Mount Rainier Leadership Camp in Randall, Washington. Overnight student travel for Chiawana High School Gear Up Summer College Tours. Overnight student travel for the Chiawana High School girls basketball team camp at Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington. Overnight student travel for the Pasco High School girls volleyball team camps at Eastern Washington University and Washington State University. We have overnight student travel for the Chiawana High School cheer team to the Great Wolf Lodge in Centralia, Washington. Overnight student travel for the Pasco High School boys wrestling Montana intensive camp at Flathead High School in Kalispell, Montana. Overnight student travel for the Pasco High School dance team competition at Arizona Grand Resort in Phoenix, Arizona. Overnight student travel for the Chiawana High School boys basketball team at Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington. Overnight student travel for the Pasco High School boys basketball team camp at Eastern Washington University in Cheney, Washington. Approval of the 2017-2018 school calendar, which people have been looking forward to, and the 2018 graduation dates. Any board discussion? Without board discussion, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. Ms. Smith, please call the roll.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Dr. Richardson?
Yes.
Ms. Lanfin?
Yes.
Mr. Landon?
Yes.
Mrs. Stokes?
Yes.
Next, we have agenda item 12, future agenda items.
So in surveying our future agenda items, we do have a placeholder in the study session for a potential MGT bond planning. That may change based on the direction of the board or events of next week, but we will for sure have reports on outrageous outcome, our 100% reading goal. Glenda Cloud will be doing probably her final board report, a graduation report. That was mean of me to schedule a board report for you on your last board meeting. Sorry, Glenda, apologize. And I'll be bringing the board meeting calendar schedule back to the board for discussion in preparation for adopting that in July. I am again requesting an executive session under 4231-10-1G for personnel. I'm anticipating it taking approximately 30 minutes, and we'll be requesting no action.
Thank you, Ms. Whitney. Thank you for joining us this evening and for your interest in Pasco Public Schools, and the board will adjourn or will recess into executive session.